Hello guys, welcome to the channel. In today's video I'm going to be showing you how to cut and sew a monostrap dress, and I'll be recreating this design we have right here. Please remember to like this video and hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so. With that being said, let's get started. I'll be using 2 yards of Ankara fabric and half yards of a crepe fabric. And in today's video, I'm going to be continuing from where we stopped in my previous video, where I showed how to draft a basic bodice with a princess dart. The first thing I'm going to do is to cut out pieces of fabric. The width of this is 1 inch, and then I'm going to use a pressing iron to fold it like so. The length of it is dependent on how long your bodice is. Then from here, I'm going to place it on the bodice like so, starting from the middle of the center front, all the way to the underbust, down to the armhole. Then you pin it down. Then after pinning it down, I'm going to take another piece of fabric, and then I'm going to be placing it 1 inch away from the previous one. When you're done with this, the next step also is to place a shorter piece of fabric 1 inch away from the previous one, and you pin it down. Then after that, I'm going to be placing another piece like so, and then I'll cut it off, or you can place it all the way to the end. It just depends on what you prefer. Also going to do the same thing. This is just me being creative. You can create your own design based on what you prefer. After doing this, you're going to sew on it like this. And then when you're done sewing, you're going to place another piece of fabric on the other side of the bodice as well. Exactly what you did, you're going to repeat it here as well. By the time you're done sewing, this is what it should look like. Now the next step is to cut out the monostrap for this bodice. So from 3 inches away from the shoulder line, I'm connecting it all the way to the shoulder line on the other side. So from this point, I'm also going to go in by 0.5 inch on the off shoulder line. This is just to ensure that the off shoulder is well placed on our body. And then while for the back, I'm going to align the zipper allowance like so, and I'll pin it down. After pinning it down, I'm going to be placing the front pattern on it. This is just to know where we are going to be placing the off shoulder for the back. I'm facing the right side together. And now I know that I'm going to be cutting the off shoulder on the right side. So from that right point, I'm going to go down by 3 inch like we did in front. And I'll use the front pattern to know exactly where to mark on the shoulder line. And then from that point, I'm going to connect all the way to the off shoulder. And then also I'm doing the same thing for the lining as well. I'm just going to place the right side facing each other, making sure that they are well aligned. Then I'll cut off the off shoulder on the right side. Then from here, I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and I will sew 1/2 inch round the neckline. And then I'll notch it and turn it to the right side and understitch it. Also for the back, I'm doing the same thing. I'm placing the lining with the fabric right side facing each other. Then I'll pin it down and I'll cut off the excess. And I'm also going to go in by 1/2 inch for the back as well, like we did in front. Then I'll take it to the sewing machine and I'll sew 1/2 inch round the neckline, notch it, and then turn it to the right side and understitch it. Then from here, this is what I have. At this point, I decided to add a band to the back side of this dress. So I've cut the band to be 3 inch wide. And then I'm going to be folding it 1/2 inch like so, and I'll sew on it. I'll do the same thing for the other side as well. Then after sewing, I'm going to be closing the zipper line with the lining, and this is what I have at the end. At this point, the next thing we are going to do is to draft the down part of the dress. And we are going to be starting from our waistline, our hip line, all the way to the length of the dress. So on the waistline, you're going to mark 1/4 of your waist measurement plus 1.5 inch sewing allowance. While on the hip line, you will mark 1/4 of your hip measurement plus 1.5 inch sewing allowance. While on the length of the dress, you're going to minus 1.5 inch from whatever we have on the hip line. You're going to mark it on the length of the dress in order to create a pencil dress. So after this, you're going to connect from the hip line down to the length of the dress using a straight rule, while you connect using a hip curve or a freehand from the waist down to the hip line, drawing the hip. Also, I will be adding 0.5 inch sewing allowance on the waistline, which we'll be using to attach to the bodice later on. And then from this point, you cut it off. So by the time you open it up, this is what it should look like. But then the first thing I will do is to place it on fold, and I'll cut on the fabric. I'm cutting for the front pattern first, so I'm placing the fabric on fold as well. Then I'll add sewing allowance to the dress length. The sewing allowance that I added is quite much here. I reduced it to 0.5 inch sewing allowance later on. And I've also placed the same pattern on the lining and I've cut on it. And then now what I'm doing is to place the lining on the fabric like so. And then I'm going to be joining the lining to the fabric at the dress length using 1/2 inch sewing allowance. Turn it to the right side and I'll understitch it. Then for the back, I've placed the same pattern on the fabric, but this time around I added a zipper allowance. I also added allowance at the length of the dress. So now I'm going in by 0.5 inch, just like we did for the bodice. We are doing the same thing for the skirt. And the reason is also because we don't want any bulkiness at that area. So from here, I'm going to cut the same thing on the lining, and I'm going to be joining it to the lining at the dress length. So when you're done with this, you're also going to use the same pattern, and we are going to be drafting the overlap now. So I'm going to be extending the length of this pattern, and then I'm extending it by 7 inches, depending on how long you want it to be. So from the other end of the waistline, I'm going to be connecting it all the way to the dress length like so. Then from the side seam, I'm going to be going in by 1.5 inch because that's the sewing allowance that we added. So from here, I'm going to just connect it all the way to the other side and I'll cut it off. And then this will be the overlap for the dress. So I'm going to be cutting it on the fabric, and I've gone ahead to add 0.5 inch sewing allowance to both sides. And I've also cut the lining as well. So now I'm just going to be joining the lining to the fabric at this point using 1/2 inch sewing allowance. Then you turn it to the right side and understitch it, and then you turn it to the wrong side and close the other side as well. By the time you're done, this is what it should look like. And then I'm done joining the hemline of the front skirt. So I'm going to be placing the overlap on it like this, and I'm going to be joining it on the waistline and on the side seam. Take note that the length of the overlap aligns with the length of the skirt. So after sewing, I'm going to be placing the skirt pattern on the bodice like so, and I'm going to be joining it at the waistline using 1/2 inch sewing allowance. Then while for the back pattern, I'm also going to be placing the back skirt on it like so. Then joining it using 1/2 inch sewing allowance on the waistline. By the time you're done joining for both sides of the back, this is what you should have. Then from here, I'm just going to be adding a zip to the back side of the dress. So you're going to add a zip all the way to the hip line, while you're going to be creating an opening at the back as well in order to ensure proper movement. And then from here, you're going to be joining the back to the front at the shoulder line. While for the other side, you're going to be joining it at the side seam. And then you also join it at the side seam on the other side as well. So at this point, I'm going to be cutting the off-shoulder sleeve, and in order to do this, I've gone ahead to cut out a piece of fabric that is about 33 inches wide. When you place it on fold, it should be 16.5 inches wide. While the length of this sleeve is dependent on how long you want it to be. Mine is 7 inches long. Then I added 2 inch extra for the hemming allowance at the top, plus another 2 inch extra for the hemming allowance at the down part. So in all, I have about 11 inches long. So now I'm going to be folding the 2 inches hemming allowance like this. And then from this point, I'm going to be placing the armhole of my dress on it like so, and then I'll be tracing out the armhole on the fabric. Then after tracing it out, you're going to cut it off. By the time you open it up, this is what it should look like. And from here, you're going to place the same pattern on the lining, and you're going to cut exactly what we have here. Then after cutting it on the lining, we're going to place each fabric together like so, and we're going to be hemming it for the up and for the down part. Then after hemming it, I'm going to be using an elastic band that is about 12 inches long. My round sleeve is 10 inches plus 2 inches sewing allowance. That's why the elastic is 12 inches long. After attaching it to the down part, you're going to be joining it at the side seam. Then after joining it at the side seam, you're going to be aligning it to the bodice like so, and you sew it. But when you're sewing, you're going to be leaving the opening for the sleeve so we can be able to pass the elastic band through. So the length of this elastic band is 11 inches, 9 inches which is the length of my off shoulder sleeve, and then 2 inches for sewing allowance. Then after attaching the elastic, we are going to be sewing the remaining part of the armhole, joining it using 1 inch sewing allowance at that point. And then for the other sleeve, I'm using my basic sleeve pattern for it. I have a video here on my channel where I showed how to draft a basic sleeve pattern in case you don't know how to do this. Then from this point, I'm just demarcating the crown of the basic sleeve pattern. I'm dividing it equally on all sides. Then for the down part also, which is the sleeve length, I'm also demarcating it, dividing it equally. Take note that the length of sleeve is 9 inches long. So after marking out the points, you're going to be connecting it together like so. And then from here, you're going to be slashing it open from the crown all the way to the sleeve length. But you're not going to be slashing it open. Just slash it as close as possible to the end. Then from this point, we're going to be placing our basic sleeve on the fabric, and then we are going to be separating one piece from the next by 1 inch, and we are going to trace out the basic sleeve pattern. I've also extended the crown. I'm going to use the same fabric to cut on the lining, and then I'll join the lining to the fabric at the sleeve length using half an inch sewing allowance. You turn it to the right side and you top stitch. And then I've also gone ahead to run a gather stitch on the crown of the sleeve. And then take note that I started the gather stitch after the sewing allowance. When you gather it, you're making sure that the length of it is equivalent to the length of the armhole for the dress. So now you're going to place in both of them together like so, and you're going to be sewing around it using half an inch sewing allowance. And that will be the end of today's video. If you enjoyed this video, remember to give it a thumbs up, like the video, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.